I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day: what does episode 9 have to do to win back the fans? Now, the reason I'm asking that question is because a couple of days ago I received the following tweet. Hi Brendan, love your channel, especially the Star Wars content. Not sure if you accept question submissions, but I always wanted to know your thoughts on this one. What does episode 9 have to do to win back the fans? Best regards, Mike. Well, Mike, thanks for your question. And first of all, in response to the first part of your question, yes, I do accept question submissions. Anyone can send me questions for me to explore on The Daily Question. The details for how you can contact me and send those questions in are always at the bottom of every video. They are in the video description of each episode of The Daily Question. Now, I do my best to answer every question, but obviously it's not possible to make an episode out of every single question I'm sent to you, and sometimes the busyness of things just get on top of me, but I do my best. So anyone can send in questions for me to explore on episodes of The Daily Question. Now, your specific question: what can episode 9 do to win back the fan base? And I've thought long and hard about your question, and the more I think about it, the more I come back with the answer: I'm not sure they can do anything at all. I'm not sure there is a way back now for them to actually win the fans back. Certainly not for the immediacy of episode 9. Maybe in the long run, given a lot of time and some big changes, that could happen. But immediately, and in particular for episode 9, I'm not convinced that can happen. Initially, I thought about the whole idea of what story points they could include or amend in episode 9 to try and appease the fan base. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought there's just not much they can do. I mean, it's not like they can retcon Luke. I mean, maybe they could say, well, he didn't really die. He just transported himself to another place. He accepted this new reality that the Force was actually good, and the whole time he was wrong to have rejected it. And so he decided to transport himself to this new place because he had some sort of revelation in the midst of this big Force push and this sort of imagined Matrix-like battle between him and Kylo Ren, and so he took himself off to that place, and hey, presto, here he is. He's alive. But you can't actually retcon the characterization of Luke. They can't, for example, say, hey, remember that awful characterization, depressive, suicidal, post-blimmin' modernist, nihilistic Luke Skywalker who just hated everything and everyone and wanted nothing to do with the Force? Well, it was all just a nightmare. It turns out that Rey is still on the Falcon. She was dreaming the whole time, and she's just woken up, and she's about to arrive at the island and meet the real Luke Skywalker, who is actually this time the real Luke Skywalker, not this awful mischaracterization of him. They can't do that. I don't think they would want to do that anyway, because I don't think they actually want to admit defeat. They don't want to admit that they actually have got things so badly wrong. Now, by the way, part of me kind of has a bit of an admiration for that, even though I think they're terribly wrong in what they've done with this franchise. I admire the fact that at least as creators, they're kind of holding their ground. At least they have some sort of basic integrity to say, well, this is the decision we've made and we're sort of sticking with it and defending it. However, I don't think they are actually going to do that to Luke, and I don't think that would work particularly well. It's not like it would just be such a cheap stunt. Reys' parentage, could they actually fix that? Well, this is one thing they possibly could fix. They've got a little bit more leeway, I think, to actually address this. And they could do what we all know she was obviously set up for, and that is to have a parental lineage that somehow is connected to a very powerful Force user, or perhaps even some sort of miraculous Force birth. Now, that wouldn't fix everything in its entirety with this character, but it would certainly go a long way to addressing the Mary Sue problem that she has. Effectively, if that was the case, she would now be more of an angelic type figure. She would be like an angel in this mythology, someone who is not naturally part of the human world, and she is bestowed with all of these extraordinary and supernatural giftings precisely because of her parentage. And that would make sense of why she is a bit of an awkward character, and why at times in the previous films she doesn't quite seem as human as the rest of us, and it's not as easy to connect with her, because in actual fact she really does have all of these amazing gifts that ordinary human beings don't have. It wouldn't fix everything, but it would go a long way to addressing that problem. But I'm not sure they're actually going to do much. I mean, maybe they will change her parentage, but I don't know if they're going to fix the other problems that exist around this character now, because it's not just the problem of her parental lineage, which would be a simple storytelling fix. It's also the fact that she is now surrounded predominantly because of The Last Jedi, with so many other storytelling problems that it's not like just fixing that one thing is going to solve all of those other problems that have got nothing to do with her parental lineage. Now, of course, they can't introduce a new supervillain either. They've destroyed their supervillain. You can't go introducing this major new supervillain in the third film of a trilogy where you've actually previously had a very out and up front supervillain who's all powerful, and then try and claim, well, no, there was an even more powerful supervillain who was hiding behind the scenes the whole time. That just isn't going to work. This is not like the original trilogy, which builds into the Emperor, and the reveal is this sort of organic development of what's going on in this storytelling universe. This here would be just so stark and contrary to everything they've done, and it wouldn't make any sense. And it's not like they could retcon Snoke. If they retconned Snoke's death and said, well, he's not really dead. I know you saw him chopped in half and lifeless, but he's not really dead because Snoke is so powerful, he wields the power to resurrect himself from death. As I said, I don't think they'd do that because that would be sheer desperation. But if they did try a stunt like that, everyone is going to ask the obvious question, well, why didn't he just do that at the time? And how come this Force user, this evil villain who is so powerful, more powerful than any other villain we've ever seen before, he's even capable of resurrecting himself from the dead, how come this guy didn't see what was blatantly, obviously going on right in front of him in the seconds that led up to him being chopped in half with that lightsaber? Now, the more I thought about various storytelling points that they could maybe either try and fix or add into this, and, maybe they could chuck in Boba Fett's great-grandson or something, the more I thought about all these gimmicks they could try, the more I realised that the problems here are huge, and they're so big that I think storytelling-wise, they've now become insurmountable. These things of, errors that compound upon one another, a multiplicity of things that have all compounded together to create a big, huge black hole, storytelling-wise, that's really inescapable. And also on top of that, they've got other issues now that go beyond just problems with the storycraft. First of all, there is the staunch commitment to ideology, and so they have allowed ideology to usurp mythology in their storytelling. And when ideology takes precedence over mythology, what you end up with is propaganda, and it's usually very cheap, and the storycraft suffers. You do things to suit the ideology, you don't do things for the sake of artistic merit, and that's very much now a bit of a hallmark of these films. But an even bigger problem. So even if they were to ditch the ideological stuff, they've got an even bigger problem here now. Lucasfilm under Disney have also cultivated a culture of open hostility towards the fan base. And any brand which has an open hostility towards their customer base is a brand that does not have much of a fighting chance in the marketplace, and they really don't have much of a future ahead of them. Any brand that has cultivated divisions between the customer base and this whole setting of one group of customers against another is a brand that doesn't have much of a future, yet that's exactly what they've done here, and this is really a big problem that I can't see how they can get around. The simple fact is that people remember that kind of stuff even more than the storytelling problems. If the hostility to the fan base wasn't there and it wasn't this cultivated division between the fan base, then I think you could perhaps fix storytelling problems and fans would be more forgiving of that kind of stuff or what had come before. But the moment the brand actually sets itself against their customers, against their fan base, is the moment they're in real trouble. That those fans have long memories. They're going to remember the way they were treated, the way they were talked about by the creators. They remember that kind of stuff. It doesn't go away. And this whole idea of sort of fostering the division that exists in the fan base, all that does is sets up a future template where your existing fans, those who are still with you, the apologists for this new way of doing Star Wars, eventually they'll just fracture and splinter and turn on you as well. It's not a particularly good forward-thinking strategy, and it really is a big problem. Now, you contrast this with what George Lucas did and how he conducted himself, because George Lucas had some real big issues between him and the fan base. After the prequels and the special edition stuff where he went and mucked around with the original trilogy, there was a lot of upset fans. There was a lot of angry fans about what Lucas did. But the thing about Lucas, whether he was a gentleman or whether he was just very astute and he figured out that he shouldn't conduct a campaign of open and hostile warfare against the fan base, he really did the exact opposite to what Disney Lucasfilm have done here. Remember that big thing about Han Solo and Greedo and you know, where he retconned that moment in Mos Eisley, and he has Han Solo defending himself? The whole thing was so absurd. The whole idea that Han wasn't just this roguish character who was willing to shoot someone to get out of that situation, to try and turn it around and say, oh no, he was just defending himself. There's no way that original shot, that original storytelling moment was ever about self-defense. It's just absurd and nonsensical to claim that it ever was intended to be that way. It just wasn't. And secondly, it was bad characterization or mischaracterization of Han Solo to go back and retcon that. The whole point is that Han Solo was a rogue. He was a bad guy. But the important point was he experienced redemption. And that was the sort of the heart and soul of his character and the storytelling arc and journey that he goes on. So to go back and then to do what he's done here suggests that he never really needed redemption in the first place. It undermines the character. It doesn't really make sense. The whole thing was an absurdity and everyone knew it. And that's why you had those t-shirts that were quite popular for a while. Han shot first. Now there's a great moment in Star Wars fandom history where George Lucas appeared in public wearing one of those shirts, Han shot first. It was almost his cheeky sort of two-fingered salute to the fan base, where he was saying, hey look, I get it, but at the same time I'm going to stand my ground too. And there was sort of a very, what you might call a collegial rivalry between us, the fans, and Lucas. We still loved him, right? It was this boyish, good-natured opposition. But what you've got here with Lucasfilm under Disney, that's not what this is. This is quite toxic, and it seems it's getting more toxic by the day. And I don't think, certainly not in the immediacy of Episode 9, you're actually going to win people back. Now, Episode 9 could be a truly amazing film. It could be some sort of Dark Knight moment, where all of a sudden, totally out of nowhere, you get this astounding film. But effectively, in order to do that, it would really have to be a standalone story. It would have to, I think, effectively maybe harken back to some of the stuff from The Force Awakens. It would certainly, though, have to completely ignore or pretend and act like or be constructed in such a way as if the events of The Last Jedi just don't count. And I'm not sure how they can do that. I can't see how they can fix this. So, the long answer and the short answer, I don't know if there is a way to win the fan base back for Episode 9. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts though, so please let me know what you think in the comments section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please support me on PayPal or Patreon. There is a link for both in the video description below. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you next week on The Daily Question.